Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls. This is episode 25, entitled Wheel in the Sky, focusing on the fun journey of Web3 gaming. This Crypto Hipsters podcast version of the Crypto Hipsters Curtain Calls is the 25th episode and focuses on four conversations with guests that I've had on the Crypto Hipster podcast from seasons 6 through 8. This particular episode, I have three guests from season 7 and one guest from season 6. The first guest I spoke with was Lucas Fulks. I spoke to him during Consensus 2024. That was when I was doing my journalism not routine, but my one-time journalism opportunity at that event where I interviewed people on the ground. And I called the 10 episodes, Crypto Hipster Presents Reporter on the Ground. This was the second of the episodes of that. We spoke about Lucas, who is the CPO of Helika, and I spoke about how to help gaming studios stop flying blind. And that was in June 2024. And the second interview in this series is with Luke Barwikowski, who is the founder and CEO of Pixels. We spoke in May 25, 2024, and we talked about the challenges and experiences behind building the world's largest social and casual Web3 game. Next up, third, is Max Fu. He's the co-founder and CEO of Nyan Heroes. We spoke in May 10, 2024, about challenging the public perception of what Web3 gaming should be. And last but not least, out of season 6, I spoke to Marc, who's the chief blockchain officer at Shrapnel. Spoke in September 2023 about still focusing on the fun, helping developers, content creators, and game players build the future of Web3 gaming. Sit back, enjoy. All these episodes are available in their entirety on Spotify, and enjoy this compilation. Thank you for tuning in. Each stage of the game life cycle, what are those stages and what's your role and involvement in each stage?
Yeah, I mean, the way we like to think about it is there's some pretty clear stages, and people would debate what the stage is, but it's almost like pre-launch, ideation phase. You're getting everything together, you're trying to decide what your core loop is going to be. Then you go into an alpha stage, which is like, we might do some light testing. Really, we're probably doing more internal testing, seeing what it looks like. Is the game working? Are there like core systems that are functioning? Then you go into beta, which is like, a little bit more sophisticated. There's more of the game there. The core loop is there. Hopefully there's a couple of features that you can start to validate. Open beta, which is like bring people in, and then launch. And the launch phase is typically where you start driving UA, really driving traffic to the game, trying to spend some marketing dollars to join. And each of those phases has like very specific technical challenges from a data perspective, and we try to address each of those pretty specifically.
Okay. So what would be some examples in each stage?
A great example is like when you're in the ideation phase. If you have a general idea, one of the things you're going to want to do is start to look at like what are competitors or whoever you've identified as competitors doing. With that, we can go index all of their contracts on chain, bring all that data in, let you know what does their retention look like, what does their monetization look like, are people trading these assets, how long are they being held, really give you some of the competitive knowledge that you need to make an informed decision. That's one example. When you get to the launch phase, we actually have our attribution platform. So as you're actually running referral campaigns, need to build live ops around it, all of that, we can really help you with each step of that. And so our attribution platform allows you to spin up links, build a referral network, so you can just post the page. Anybody can sign up, get their own link. When they refer someone, we know who referred them. You can reward the referrer. You can reward the referee. And one thing that's really cool about that is that's just one of the systems. So then the live ops can layer in, which is if you come from this source, these are the experiences you get inside of Helika Engage, which has different rewards, tiers, and systems that tied to it.
Cool. So what do you see as, like right now I have a Web2 game that I play like all the time. My wife just looked at the bill last month. She was like, how did you spend $500 last month? I'm like, it's called Royal Match, and I get addicted to that. I'm like, okay, it's a gotcha game, you know.
That's how they work.
That's how they work. What is the future of Web3 gaming as opposed to Web2 games?
Yeah, I mean, just honestly, I think that's a fallacy. I think that's something we're hearing a lot in the industry, like, what is the future of Web3 games? And my opinion is the future of Web3 games is that they are no longer called Web3 games. They're just games. And Web3 becomes part of the underlying infrastructure that's available for certain systems and certain utilities, just like AWS is or Google Cloud is or any of those different softwares people use. I think right now, the reason it's called Web3 gaming is we're still really early in this cycle. Like people lose the, if you look at the internet, it wasn't really popularized for a very long time. Like, we're really just now getting to like, okay, everyone's using this, it all works really well, last couple of years. And Web3 is pretty nascent to that, especially in gaming. And so what I think happens is we'll see people build better systems, better platforms that make it easier to integrate Web3. A lot of the pain of being a Web3 engineer inside of a game studio will be abstracted away. There will be softwares that really make that easy to do and like kind of just part of core game building. And then I think Web3 will become a genre or like a category that it empowers the user to have some utility, some ownership, and they feel really connected to the game. And that'll be a new slice of the pie inside of gaming. But I don't think we'll see it as contrasted as this is traditional gaming, this is Web3 gaming.
You believe, or no, I don't know if you believe this, that blockchain games can monetize at magnitudes that are far greater than traditional games, right? Is that true or false? And how can you help your players capitalize on that assumption?
Yeah, there's certainly potential there. I think the reason why blockchain gaming is maybe interesting is there's potential for more efficient ad spend or reward distribution, and potentially really, really interesting unlocks on the user acquisition side. And then the other side too is there's potentially better monetization, or the monetization looks a little bit different than it would inside of a Web2 game, which is potentially more effective as well. So this is the area where people start actually proving this out, and this is the stuff that we're working on right now. I think that really is kind of the point when you can say Web3 gaming is it's not completely figured out, but it works. It's completely valid, at least when it comes to building a game. And yeah, we're still so early in the space, no one's quite proven out like the fundamentals of this, but that's what we're shooting towards basically. So here's an example of monetization. For example, Web3 monetization and Web2 monetization can look a little bit different. For example, in Web2, you're always spend focused, right? And you kind of want to extract the value out of users as much as possible. The interesting part about Web3 monetization is there's kind of a similarity in terms of the economics of a Web3 ecosystem of having a user spend a token versus also just having them not sell it. So there's some interesting mechanics that you might be able to introduce inside of a Web3 game, like not staking, but things that might resemble staking in terms of gameplay. So for example, we're about to introduce mechanics that are like upgrades, where you put tokens into the game and you can downgrade it. You can get the upgrade back, basically. Maybe we take like a small 10% fee. But essentially what that does is it creates higher spend per user because the user doesn't necessarily feel like the money's going away or the token's going away, right? So then it's on us to basically, keep them into the game or keep them into the system. And then when it comes on the other side, when it comes to like cost per install or customer acquisition cost, this is where we're innovating the most. Most of the big Web2 gaming companies in the casual or mobile game space, they are the biggest companies because they have basically discovered huge competitive advantages when it comes to, CPI or retention inside of their games. So essentially they can get a higher LTV out of their users because the users that they're targeting when it comes to performance marketing are more of the right types of users. What we've been working on is essentially a different piece of that stack. I like to call it direct to consumer rewards, where essentially what we're trying to figure out is when we target users on the top level, how can we make sure that these users stay inside of the game and stay inside of the ecosystem? And can we actually convert them into net spenders as well too? And what that basically looks like for us is, we have a huge reward budget through the token that we get to give out every single month. Our job is basically to give out this reward budget in the most efficient manner. And what that means is we want to basically give out tokens to people who are, eventually likely to spend, who are willing to share the game with their friends or their family, or who provide like other kinds of ecosystem value. So we've been doing a lot of work on basically the segmentation of users. What this means is identifying users in different types of categories, kind of bucketing them, labeling them, and then figuring out who the right people to give all of these incentives are, at what stage in the life cycle the right time to give an incentive is, and then what actual effect this incentive has on, the metrics that we care about, which are, retention, engagement, monetization. And we're asking questions like, what are the right ratios of different types of users to give out these incentives to? So I mean, yeah, the key thesis here is like, we do this, we actually even might be able to make play to earn work and be sustainable. I think in the long run, it maybe looks a lot like free to play monetization, where maybe 95% of your user base actually earns, because what you're doing is you're, instead of spending money on ads, just giving out that ad spend directly to users. And then, you still monetize about 5% of your users like a normal free to play game would. So yeah, there's experimentation there. If we pull this off, then it's a really big opportunity. That's kind of the exciting thing for us right now.
But you said you're talking about your team a little bit. You mentioned your team. So, and you mentioned that you built a community first. So you didn't just nab people from Web 2 and bring them over. People came over, right? Your team is made up of a mix of Web 2 veterans and Web 3 developers. So you have an advantage there with the adoption. What's your advantage, and what insights that do you have that other games who are just startups may not have?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because building in Web3 has been quite an eye-opening experience for me. And the thing about Web3 is the space moves really quickly. And because the space moves really quickly, narratives also move really quickly in Web3. In fact, a lot of projects and kind of uh, trends are based around narratives alone in Web3. And I think what has happened in the gaming sector for Web3, I find it to be fairly interesting because originally it started out with, things like Axie and was play to earn. And then there was this narrative shift of, okay, well, it can't be play to earn. You need a good game. You need something that's sustainable, something, where users will just play for fun and they're not always after a return on their investment. And that became the prevailing narrative. And now it's kind of the narrative has shifted again. And people are talking about, well, you need to have this degen mindset, or you need to be able to kind of cater to the Web3 degens in order to succeed. And, between the first narrative and the one that I just mentioned, there's probably been 10 other narratives mixed in between. The thing with us is that our thesis hasn't really changed from day one. I'm a pretty simple dude. I think I try not to overcomplicate things. And when I look at games over the last sort of 2 decades, even though the format has changed, the monetization has changed, the devices have changed. One thing has never changed, and that is for a game to be successful, it must be fun. I don't want to overcomplicate things and start kind of over engineering what it takes to make a good game in Web3. The fundamental core principle is it should be fun. And that's what we've been building towards. When you look at our team composition, we mostly have traditional game developers working on the game. And everything that we do when it comes to game design, visuals, IP, narrative, lore, core loops, it's all done through a traditional Web 2 development, workflow and lens. So ultimately, what the team is trying to do is to create an experience that is enjoyable and fun. We do have obviously some Web3 natives working on the team, some Web3 developers, as well as biz dev in Web3. That's all necessary, but we skew Web 2 heavily because ultimately you can financially engineer the game as much as you want. You can create all these flywheels, you can create all these different incentives, and you can really leverage that degen mindset. But at the end of the day, if your product is not fun, it's not sticky, there's no engagement, there's no retention, or in fact, it's just vaporware, it's not going to be sustainable. So that's how we operate.
I played games where I created the content and I thought I had to own it too, and I didn't. But what's you know what's the future and the evolution of player created content, especially in Web3, look like, in the gaming space, and what challenges or obstacles remain to, for achieving, that growth or, transformation?
Yeah, it's a great question, and so it's something we spend a lot of time on clearly, right? And so the key thing is you want to take a creator first approach, right? And so like, hey, how can I help this person? Because if you have more creators, and part of that is helping them get connected with the most players, then you're going to have a really robust community of people that are creating content and distributing content, right? And so if we look at like how we create content, we want to make sure that the tools are really easy. And then, making sure that when you create something, there's a license attached to it, so you have control over who can do what with it, which is really important, right? Sometimes you want to make sure that it's not used in third-party games, it's not used in different types of games, it's not used in other places where you might have licenses that you sell things where it can be used in media. So a lot of people will do like recordings in like Unreal Engine and things like that. So you might want to say if you're creating a character, there might be things around that. So you give them the ability to specify a license that's for it. You give them the ability to create something that can be brought to any chain that they care about, right? And so that's where we use bridging with Layer 0 in our contracts to allow you to take it from, we start in our subnet, but you could bring it to Ethereum, or you bring it to Avalanche C or other networks, is really important. The other thing is making sure that you provide the right information in the public metadata. So we look at like public metadata and private metadata, right? And so the public metadata are things that help inform people what this thing can actually go do. And it will work with we have our own marketplace, but if you take it someplace else, you bring it to OpenSea or something else that knows how to work with items, that should just work. So just make sure that like the metadata is compatible with where you want to take it. And also making sure that part of that metadata identifies what the status is of an item, right? And so if you created something that is not available to be used in a game, maybe you were able to mint something and get it through the filters that has like hate speech or things that are in there, maybe like a swastika or something. You want to make sure that people understand this thing that I'm buying may not be actually be able to be used, right? And so understanding like what's the applicability of what I have here. The other thing is, we talk about metadata, is if you think about when I mint these things, they're generally in what's called an edition. So I might have an edition of 500 of these stickers. So there's a level of scarcity that's implied there. And some people pay more for one of 500, and 13 might be their lucky number, is 13 of 500. So being able to identify not just the edition size, but what's the number within the edition is helpful. And so I think if you start with those, it works out pretty well. I think also the right attitude. Don Norbury, who's our head of studio, has a great way to talk about this, folks. Like, no, you create these assets with our tools, but you own the IP. You're basically letting us use the assets that you've created. And so once you sort of shift to that sort of creator first mindset, I think it's super helpful. So now you've got content that's created and it's out there. Just making sure that when you go to different chains, that you can track the royalties that are there, and also understanding that user-generated content can be combined, right? And so you might want to say that you're going to build a skin, and these two stickers can go on the skin, right? And so if you put those two stickers on the skin, and so imagine you create a sticker, I create a sticker, and Don creates a skin, and our stickers go on that. Well, we want to, first of all, we want to allow that to happen or not. And if we do, we want to make sure we get a piece of the pie, right, when it gets sold, and part of the royalties on secondary sales and things. And so there's this notion of what's called a royalty split. And so you say, okay, hey, I want to make sure that when this is sold, like the game will get a little piece. We'll have Jamil and Marc will also get their piece for this, and then Don, who made this, will get some. And so and we have an algorithm that the team has been putting together that looks at like how much of the surface area is contained by the different stickers to give you like the right split for when it gets combined and things like that. So there's a bunch of thought there, and just making sure that one, that you've got agency and it's portable and can be brought to other places. You've got the right metadata that allows people to sell it or use it in other games. A license that tells you how people can use it. And then making sure when it gets sold or resold that we can pay royalties out to the creators and have clear communication of what royalties were paid out for and why. And the last thing I sort of hinted at is having some level of moderation, so users can report. It's actually a much tougher problem than you might think. Definitely for me, so I spent a lot of time at Microsoft, right? And so Microsoft and Google and Amazon and others have these great image moderation tools, but they're almost entirely focused on images from pictures, right? If you think about a sticker or a skin, that's something that someone's designed, so it's more like art. And so they have really hard times finding, they had a really low success rate across the board, so it wasn't one versus the other, in finding things that we thought would be flagged as objectionable, didn't get flagged. And so that adds a whole level of overhead that you're introducing, both technical and people to moderate and flag.